Hello, everyone. Geoffrey Nance here with you again. It's Wednesday, and so here we are, 11:30 Central, which means it is Word Wednesday time. So whether you're joining us live or you're going to be viewing this later, appreciate you taking some time to be a part of this. Today, we're actually going to talk a little bit about us individuals. Why are we the way that we are? And are we supposed to stay that way? So I'm actually going to share a little bit of a personal story with you guys. It just happened to me this week. So we were in the midst of disciplining our youngest daughter, and I employed a tactic that my dad had used with me way back in the day. Um, and it's not very effective. that's the truth. It's not very effective, but I learned how to deal with it, right? Because my daughter was kind of hysterical, and she just kept crying, and just like I was like, all right, you got to calm down. I'm gonna give you 10 seconds to calm down, right? And I start counting, and then she's just still breathing hard and panting hard, and I'm like, all right, you're not doing it. This isn't good. You're about to get punished again. And then that made her more hysterical. And my wife was, talked to me afterwards, trying to do the whole team approach. And she was like, that you put her in a situation where she couldn't win, and she just couldn't calm herself. And then you counting down didn't make it easier. I was like, well, I learned how to do it, self-control kind of thing. She was like, maybe there's a better way to do it. And one of the things that I've really been trying to do, I would say over the last year or two, is to be honest about where I am. Like where are those areas in my life where I really need to seek improvement? And so I've started really trying to take this in a serious fashion. I remember when we're at our step ones, we kind of talk about this idea that the older we get, the more cynical we become. And this cynicism causes us to be slow to act. And I think part of what goes along with that statement, which I think is certainly, there's a lot of truth to it, is that as we get older, we have a tendency to say, this is the way I like to do things. We say phrases like, well, that's who I am. You just have to deal with it. And I don't think that's healthy. I really don't. I also don't think it's biblical. So even more important than what I think it's not healthy is not biblical. So I've got a couple of illustrations here, and so that we know that Jesus is the potter, right, and that we're the clay, and so he makes of us what he wants. And so what's interesting about that is, if you create a vessel, for the most part, right, that once you've created something, it is that thing. Okay, so if I were to get out there and I were to make something with clay, it would probably look pretty terrible, but I would make it. And then whatever I made it into, that's what it would be. If I put it through the whole furnace process and the glazing and all that, but if it's just still clay, well then I can go in and reshape it and turn it into something else. And so what I was kind of wondering is, and I wanted to present this to you guys today, is are we set? Are we set in our behaviors? Are we created and like done? So like God created us, and that's right. I'm just the way that I am. And if you don't like the way that I am, then tough, but that's the way that I am. Or is Jesus wanting to do a continuous work in our life where he's like, well, that we can change. Matthew 5:48 says, be perfect as my heavenly Father is perfect. So a lot of Christians, they make this excuse. They say, well, nobody's perfect. Well, that's really terrible theology. That's terrible theology. Jesus was perfect. All right, so let's take that phrase completely out of our vocabulary as a believer, because Jesus was perfect. So when he says to us, be perfect as my heavenly Father is perfect, then we have to start to assess, did he mean it? Was he just throwing out some random phrase going, this sounds good, I think I'll say that today? Or was there an intention? Yes. Jesus really wants us to strive for perfection. Like in our actions and our attitudes, does he really want us to be thinking about, how can I improve? How can I really be more like the Father? Because if you say, well, that's just the way that I am, and I'm set in my ways, then basically what you're saying is that nobody can now come in and mold you, that you can't improve, you can't get better because you're like, that's the way I am. That's just who I am. Well, is God then not capable of doing a work in your life? Is your heart hardened, right? So you're sitting there going, all right, so I have gone through the hardening process. I'm no longer moldable clay. I am hardened clay. And what I'm saying is, not even God can change me because I've become hardened. And so I am just who I am. It's just the way that I am. And if that's the case, and you say, I am who I am, but you don't look as much like Jesus as you should, that is problematic. All right. Because our goal is to say, well, I should look as much like Jesus as I should. So in my words, in my actions, in my attitude, I ought to reflect Jesus. They were first called Christians in Antioch. Now, they used that as a derogatory phrase because they said these people look and talk and act so much like Jesus, we're going to call them little Christ. All right. So thus the term Christian. It was a derogatory term, meaning they acted and looked and talked so much like Jesus, they called them little Christ. I think it would be fantastic today if more and more people saw Christians and they saw it in that term. Those people, they talk and they act and so much like Jesus. Those people are Christians over there. Sadly enough, I don't know that across the spectrum that's really the case for many of us, right? I mean, it's just be honest. How much do we really look and act and resemble Jesus? So particularly what I wanted to ask you guys today is to say, do you believe that Jesus is still doing a work in your life? Because Paul talked about a 3-step process, right? He says, I have been saved, I am being saved, and I will be saved. What in the world? What? Like, if you get saved, you're saved. What was he talking about? He was talking about this process. So Jesus had rescued his life. Jesus had turned his life around, and Jesus was still in the process of saving him, of turning his life around, of making his life into what it would want to be. And then ultimately he knew that he would see Jesus again. The 3 stages, what Paul understood. Look, I was dead. Now I'm alive. Now that I'm alive, Jesus is making me into who I want to be. But when I die, then I'll be fully who I am supposed to be. But there was a sense where Paul understood, look, in the meantime, while I'm here on this earth, Jesus wanting to do a work in my life, and it's a transformational work. Part of the reason that I think I despise this idea of I'm just who I am is because it severely tries to limit what Jesus is capable of. So the same Jesus who opened the eyes of the blind, the same Jesus who healed people of leprosy, the same Jesus who made lame people walk, the same Jesus who brought dead people to life, is now incapable of doing a work in your life? Nah. I can't do that. Right? I can't come to that conclusion. I can't look at the totality of everything that Jesus done and then think back to, the disciples are in a boat, Jesus down below, and the storm becomes so great. Now, these guys aren't just people, it's their first time on a boat. Some of these people are like full-time fishermen. These same people, they go down below and they're like, Jesus, are you not concerned? Like, we're all going to die. Come up here. And Jesus is like, all right. And then he talks and he says, peace, be still. And then these guys are amazed. They're like, what? Who is this guy? Now, they'd already seen him do miracles, but they say, who is this guy who even the wind and the waves obey him? And so now all of a sudden they're baffled. Yeah, he's done all these miracles, but now even nature itself is listening to him and obeying. Well, this is the same Jesus who said in the beginning, right? Let there be light, and there was light. He is the creator. Okay. So why in the world would Jesus, who has this kind of ability to heal the blind and the lame and to make people walk again, all right, and to rise up from the grave, not be capable of doing a work in our life? So I would be very hesitant, guys, if you find yourself saying, well, that's just the way I am. That's not good. In no way is that a good situation, because basically you're saying, well, I'm not moldable clay anymore. And I believe that Jesus is doing a work in our lives, each of our lives as believers, where he wants us to be moldable clay, because his goal is to make us more like him. So if there are areas of our lives where we aren't like Jesus, there should certainly be change. Otherwise, that's problematic, because we can't be more like him if we're saying, here's an area of my life that I'm not changing. I know it's not like Jesus, but I'm not going to change it. So we're just basically saying, I'm not going to be like Jesus in that area. That's a pretty strong statement to make. And you might be thinking, well, I don't really think of it that way. Well, how else do you think of it? So Jesus wanting to do a work in our lives, guys, and he's wanting to challenge us. He's wanting to continue to mold us into the kind of people that he wants us to be, the kind of people that look like him. And oftentimes, in order to look like him, that means that we have to change areas of our life where we're just not really at the level where we could or should be. And that's okay, right? As long as we're willing to keep climbing. It's not okay just to say, well, this is just the way I am. Because when you say it's just the way I am, now you're taking away the power of what Jesus is wanting to do in your life, which is a transformational work. That's one of the awesome things about becoming somebody who was dead and somebody who's now alive. That's a massive transformational work. That's the kind of business that Jesus does. That's who he is. He makes transformation. So why would the creator of the universe, right, the one who transformed individuals' life from death to life, not want to do ongoing transformational work in our lives on a day-to-day basis, a week-to-week basis, month-to-month, year-to-year, decade-to-decade basis, where we become more and more like him in words and in actions? So Matthew 5:48, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect, is something that we ought to take more seriously and say, what areas? And then David even asked this, so search my heart and see if there's any unclean thing in me. What he's saying is, I want you to do a deep dive, because maybe there's some areas in my life that need to be fixed, but I'm not really aware of them. And we're not going to fix anything if we don't think that there's a problem. I mean, that could be true about your car, your house, your life, your relationships, anything. You're not going to fix something unless you realize it needs to be fixed. And what I want to challenge you guys and encourage you guys to do is to be open to what Jesus is doing in your life, and never think that you get to a point where you're just the way that you are, especially if the way that you are is less than where you ought to be. Because our goal, right, is to be up here. So to look and act and think so much like Jesus that people would actually confuse us for being him, to call us a little Christ, someone who's so much like Jesus. So they talk like Jesus, they act like Jesus, they treat people like Jesus. That person must be a Christian. That's our goal, right? That's our goal. So I want to encourage all of us, right? And this is me included. Find somebody in your life who is willing to tell you hard things, who's willing to tell you truthful things about yourself. Yeah, you know what, Geoffrey, in this area, I think you could be better. Yeah, you know what, you could be more encouraging. Yeah, you could smile more. you could be nicer. You could do this. You could be more helpful around the house. You could be more of a servant. You could be less lazy. Like we need some, like, we don't like to hear those things because it's pointing out areas where we're lacking. But like I mentioned, guys, if we can trust the person who's saying those things, then God can be using that person in our life to help us to become more like him. And ultimately, that should be our goal as believers, is that we would become more like Jesus. And oftentimes, in order to change, is people rarely change unless they see a reason why they need to change. And so that desire for change needs to be great enough that we're willing to now put in the hard work that will be required in order to change. Because the more that we do something, the more habitual it becomes, the harder it is to overcome. That's not necessarily an excuse. That's a reality. But to say that we're going to have to be at a place where not only am I willing to see, yes, this is an area where I need to work, but to find somebody to hold us accountable as we work on that. And those are things that God's clearly laid out in the Word to say that they're important in life. And if it's worth doing, then it's something that we ought to be pursuing. All right, guys, be moldable clay. Be open to areas of your life where you can improve and you can be better. And that should be our goal for each one of us. And if there are areas of our life that really do need to be changed, then let's be people that are committed to making those changes, to doing those hard things, and becoming more and more like Jesus in each area of our life. Guys, thanks for being a part of Word Wednesday today. If you thought that this was helpful, this was a good message, please share it with other people because we want as many people as possible to hear the Word. We want to spread that seed and let it fall. And then hopefully it falls on good ground that's ready to receive it in a positive way so that it might yield fruit 100,000 times or more. That would be fantastic. So you guys go out, spread that word, and let other people know about this. Continue to become the person Jesus wants you to be.